On this edition of Herk's Workshop, we'll be taking a behind-the-scenes look at the Inertia Bead experiment and demonstration, one of the professor's all-time favorites and a favorite with the kids as well. So let me show you a little version of it. Inertia, again, is something that if a body is at rest, it tends to stay at rest unless it is acted on by an outside force. And for this demonstration, we'll have this little string of beads. And if it's just here by itself, just hanging around, nothing happens. But if I act on it from outside, give it just a little bit of momentum and get some of that energy flowing, watch what happens. Watch what usually happens. Again, as I've said before, when an experiment doesn't work or demonstration doesn't work, it's not the fault of the science, it's usually the fault of the one doing the demonstration. And here I just didn't pull quite fast enough, hard enough to get the momentum built up. So let's do this again. Okay, short, sweet, and it's okay. But there's not a whole lot to that, right? But you can still see the principle behind the inertia. You have all that in there, and what happens is when the beads start coming out, the weight of the beads falling continues to pull the beads out of the container, as long as they're not tangled up inside, as long as you give it a good little tug at the start, like we didn't do just a second ago. But if you have it set up so that it's a little bit higher and you pull it, as soon as the weight gets out of the container, it will continue pulling it out until another force, either stops it because it's tangled, or it just runs out of beads. And so it doesn't take long for it to empty this little strand of beads. So let me see if we can do it again a little bit higher, and we'll get a little bit more momentum, a little bit more energy pulling those beads out. So watch and see how quickly that goes. Alright, so I would always encourage you to give it a good tug and be sure you have some height on there, because the more drop space you have, then the faster it will come out and the more exciting the demonstration will be. And so again, this one is a small version, and I usually start with that. The professor likes to start out with something small, and people go, oh, that's nice, and then he says, but we have to go big, because we're either going to go big or we're going to go home. And so we're getting ready to go big. And when we go big, when I say big, I mean big. We have a container here with 250 feet of beads in the container. And so we're going to, you'll notice it's colored on one end, red, so it's a little easier to find the end. So this, again, with the professor, you'll see in his demonstration that he takes it, obviously to an extreme, plays to the kids and the crowd, oftentimes even having his assistant or someone from the audience stand there with an umbrella, and he climbing a ladder and pulling it out, and it comes down on top of the umbrella, and then you get this secondary cascade down all around the floor. I'll share a couple of cautions with you after we see if this one will work. It's been loaded for a while, and that's one of the things I would caution you about, is if it's loaded for a while, it gets moved around a lot, sometimes it tends to get tangled up. So let me see. We'll just go ahead and start. I know this is always an exciting part, and after the first few seconds you can tell whether this is going to work or not. So I've got a container down here, hopefully to catch some of this stuff in. So let's just go ahead and see what happens. Okay, and now we see there is that little bit of a tangle. So normally this won't happen. We've already gone about a fourth of the way down. So if this happens again, just take it as an opportunity to teach and say, it doesn't always work the way we plan for it to, but we just keep trying. We go back and we either do it again or we continue where it's left off. And so if you're teaching that little lesson, you could actually be putting the beads back in like this, so that it's ready to go again. We're not going to reload the whole thing. You can, but you don't have to at this point. You just want to put a few more in, and primarily because I missed my container down here. So we got those back in, and so let's see if we can get this going again. We'll get it up here, so we've got a good distance to fall. We'll go ahead and start this again. So while this is going on, you can, play along with it and watch it fall. So it's going to keep on coming. Almost there. All right. Thank you. Now, as you can see, this was 250 feet of beads, and it emptied in less than a minute. Now, I've got a big pile down here. I wanted to have it like that so I could perhaps show you when you're putting these back in. A couple of things that we've learned the hard way. It's taken a few hours at times to straighten this mess out. Generally speaking, when it goes out on the floor or in a container, if you don't mess with it, it's normally easy to reload. If it's all over the floor, it's okay. But if someone moves the pile or it's just shifted around, then you start getting these things twisted and tangled, and then you have to go through and separate each little strand, and it becomes quite frustrating. Good exercise in patience. So I've got these down here. I wanted to show you the way that we would reload these is we start them in like this and just simply start pulling, and I won't do the whole thing right now, but if you just start pulling, and what's happened down here is it's come out of my container, so my container is now emptying out on the floor. And I'm just going to let it go because I'm always fascinated by this. This tells me a couple of things. One, that they came in easily and right on top of each other so that it would not be tangled. Because if this was tangled, it wouldn't be doing this right now. It would have already stopped itself. So we got about 4 feet to go. All right, we're done. Again, a little bonus exhibition there. Even though you couldn't see it, I enjoyed watching it here. So as we pull these up, you want to lay them back in kind of in a layer around and around. It's good if you have an assistant to do this, and I've had a few over the years. Who have gotten this down to almost, and see, here's what I was talking about. They've gotten it down to a science almost, putting things back in. But you see what happens when it gets it starts to get tangled. This is just one little loop, but you figure that out, and you can see where they've crisscrossed. And so I'm not going to load this back up because obviously at this point it's going to be more difficult to do because of that secondary piling, and so I'm actually feeding it out of the bottom of the pile instead of the top. So that's going to be a little frustrating. I'll do that later or get someone else to do it. So this again is the beads teaching the lesson of inertia. So you've got it in the container, and once you start that motion, you start the momentum and then the weight and then gravity. So there's a whole lot of things you can tie in there. Or as we usually say, you can just go for the wow factor and say, ha ha, amazing, now, next. And you can do that. But these are the inertia beads. You can find them online. We didn't make these. We got them from an online supplier. I would imagine you could make them with a lot of beads. This is 250 feet. Of the beads, and so you can track some of those down yourself. It also works with the little tiny chains, the little ball chain. That works as well. Anything that's in a long string and has those little bead shape. And when you pull that out, it will unload it fast. So that again is the inertia bead experiment and demonstration. Thank you for